Hello everybody, once again I'm bringing you a recap of my TGR GT Cup, and unfortunately I didn't do very well, and also unfortunately my recording got corrupted, so you get to see my live ugly reaction to every little mistake I made. You might be able to tell I was actually in good spirits as the race started because I got a pretty good qualifying position considering everyone I was racing against. I did start in third, but I made a bunch of really silly mistakes. Firstly, I chose to use a brake balance that I hadn't practiced whatsoever, and I also hadn't practiced all of the tire compounds because I was actually pretty certain of a strategy, and then the more I looked into the race, the more I realized that strategy was not going to work every time, so I was, once again, unprepared. On top of all of that, because of the times that I get to practice, I wasn't able to find anyone to practice with that had my kind of pace. I wasn't able to practice with anyone that would be up to pace in this race, so I wasn't aware of how bad the dirty air was going to be. So I started on tires I was not used to. I had a brake balance I wasn't used to, and I didn't know what the dirty air was going to be like. Recipe for disaster. A year ago, I would have been really happy finishing in the position that I finished in, given the people I raced against, and I would have been happy with my pace, but the points are really all that matters right now because, once again, I want to go to the finals, and unfortunately, you're going to see they weren't enough. I think I've admitted this in the previous recaps, and I definitely mentioned this on stream, but I still get really nervous when I race against these people because I've raced against them for so long, and I've usually not been able to withstand their pace, not been able to keep up with any of these guys, and so anytime that I'm even close to being able to keep up with them, I get so extra nervous, especially with someone like Randall directly behind me, Windfire and Dino right in front of me. I always feel that I'm battling people that I don't deserve to be battling, despite the fact that I have earned my place here. So given those feelings of apprehension and all of these variables that I wasn't used to, it immediately started wrong. You can see that I'm super not comfortable with the tire compound. Everyone's taking off. Randall is getting really close to me, and unfortunately things don't get any better anytime soon. I missed that apex, set me up really strangely for this, and Randall could have passed there. Of course, no one's going to pass right before the straight, but this was just falling apart immediately. As many of my friends have told me, and if you watch my stream, you'll know that one of my biggest issues is that if I make a mistake, then it kind of just cascades in on me, and I'm usually unable to get my pace back up. And I've worked on that, and I am usually able to get my pace back up, but I still make some mistakes. So here, I decided to just let Randall go because Randall's almost always faster than me, and battling this early on is just going to separate us from the pack, and you definitely don't want that in a race like this. Another one of my big weaknesses is not being able to figure out exactly when I should brake when I'm following behind someone. The last thing I want to do is run into someone, so I always choose to be a little bit more cautious than I should. And in this case, it usually results with me not braking at 100%, and then I've got to try to adjust after that, and you'll see here, I didn't adjust nearly enough. I was throwing it all away, and I knew it.
Did a terrible start.
Now, most of the time, I would just let my anger completely take over and I'd start driving terribly, but I have been practicing just trying to forget what's happening right now because with 17 more laps, absolutely anything can happen. I was also very confident in my pace here. I knew exactly what I could do if I was able to lock everything down, so I didn't give up. Because I'd made that big mistake earlier, and Randy had to pass me going into the first chicane, I think that put enough space between him and the leaders that he wasn't able to get enough slipstream to really run away from me that much, and I was able to stick with him coming out of that corner. As you can see, Sosa was on the attack, but I was not about to give it up. Defending on the outside means that I have the inside on the next corner, and I can also carry a little bit more speed, and I knew that. I was also really confident in the braking on that corner, so I just stuck with it. I knew that I was going to lose the position, and I was going to lose a lot more going into the penalty zone, but if I can hold him back just a little bit before serving this penalty, then it was going to make it a little bit easier for me to try to catch up with him and the people behind. It's perhaps a little ridiculous to think this way, but one of the things that kept me going this entire time was knowing that if I were able to make some kind of comeback, then it would be fantastic content for the YouTube channel. As I say that, here I am completely understeering going into the Porsche curves and losing one more position. So when I was watching the Asian region and the OCE region, I noticed that there was so much rain so often that it didn't seem like any of the dry stints were long enough to justify using medium tires. So I elected not to practice with them at all. Partially because I didn't think I needed to, but also partially because I had such limited practice time that I figured it was a better idea just to practice on the tire compounds that I thought most likely would be used for the race. Ultimately, it was a massive mistake, as you can see from this completely dry start. I had also been practicing with neutral brake balance, and I had heard just before the race that if you use neutral brake balance, then your rear tires would most likely die and make it a lot more dangerous, and that was just another mistake on my part. Regardless of what other people may or may not do, I wasn't prepared for that, and so I should have just stuck with what I was practicing. So I'm still here adjusting to the different brake balance as well as these new tires, but luckily it's at the beginning of lap 2 and you can see I'm actually hitting apexes again. The other really big mistake I made, not practicing with fast people. Right there is another example of why that was a mistake. I was not used to the dirty air, and so tire compound I'm not used to, brake balance I'm not used to, and the dirty air I'm not used to. It resulted in yet another penalty. And that's kind of been the story of all of my driving recently. In the manufacturer race earlier today, the 3 penalties I got meant that I finished 7 seconds behind everyone else in the race. So, of course, this is just part of my lore. It's building character. Unfortunately, I've been in the character building stage for like 5 years, but eventually we're going to have some character at the end of this. My first video in this series was racing against the legend that is Doodle. And Doodle's known for being a road car legend. And personally, I think he can drive anything, just absolutely anything. When it comes to road cars, he's on a completely different level. But that's not why he wasn't quite as fast as you'd expect. He wasn't that fast because he hadn't actually practiced. The man in 6th place right now in this incredibly competitive lobby had not practiced, and that's just his natural pace, just hopping in a car. Knowing that, I figured it would be safe for me to try to put a move on him, because even if he was to pass me again, I could most likely make another pass and then try to catch back up with the lead pack. Seeing that Holman had that penalty ahead of me meant that at least he would be closer too, and so as long as you have one car connecting you to the next car ahead, then you can kind of use their slipstream to play leapfrog. Now that was the plan that I was thinking in my head, but unfortunately what happened was Doodle just passed me, and then after a little bit of battling, I got ahead of him, and then Holman was just way too far ahead to catch for the longest time. Thanks to a lot of battling, and because I just had completely clean air, just a hot lap and try to catch up, I was able to get really close. However, we were all paying attention to the weather radar. The moisture you can see on that weather radar had been present for over a lap, and it looked like it was going to hit just before we were able to get in the pit, so it seemed like it would be the perfect time for all of us to jump in the pits and grab the intermediates. I remember thinking that I had practiced the pit entry, which is really important in races like this. However, I did realize before I got there I hadn't practiced it in the medium tires, so I think I was a little bit too cautious jumping in here. As always, too cautious is much better than being too hardcore about it, and so the fact that I made it in without incident, of course, is really good, but I think I did lose a few precious tenths jumping into the pits. Now, I just set the fastest lap, as you can see, and I was happy knowing that I had practiced on the intermediate tires. So we're back on familiar tires. I'm starting to get used to the brake balance, and we're close enough to Randy that I feel like I can at least stick with them. Now, if you look at the standings, you'll see that at least 3 people decided not to take tires, which is, of course, a super brave move. One of those people is Windfire, and Windfire, as you know, previously went from 2nd place, actually I think he was in the lead, I think he was in 1st place, down to not even in the top 8. I'm not sure what position he dropped down to because you can only see the top 8 from where I was, but with Windfire, when it comes to tire strategy, you can never count him out. I hope it's not too jarring with all of the cuts, but this race was actually an entire hour long, and I don't want to bore anyone. I just want to get to all the juicy parts that can really show the story of the race, and I think we're getting to one of the juicy parts. So right here, you'll see that one of the very brave souls that decided not to take tires is SV Paymay. Poor guy did not have a good day this day, but I was feeling pretty good. If I can take a moment to brag, I did have one race victory when I was in the finals of GT Academy in 2014, and that was a wet race in an S15. At the time, I was driving an S13, and where I live in Oregon, it rains 9 months out of the year. And when they talked about the various Oregon guys, because there were multiple Oregon guys at that competition. One of the guys that was judging, he was the previous year's champion, also from Oregon. He said that Oregon drivers all have to dodge slow drivers in the rain. And so, not saying Holman's slow, but he was saying that we do tend to drive better in the wet, and I'm very confident in the wet. Anyways, I digress. That was really cringy, but I'm leaving it in.
Did he lift?
Randy was able to get ahead of Holman, and I was definitely able to, at the very least, keep up with him, so I was going to do everything I could just to put the pressure on him and attack anytime that I felt I had the opportunity. You may or may not know about the Porsche GT Cup. It was a Just America championship that ran for, I think it was just 1 month of races, and the finalists all got to compete in Indianapolis. And looking at the list of people we're competing with, obviously this is North America and America, and it makes sense that the top drivers are competing in this race, but you can see Windfire, Dino, Sam, myself, Holman, all of us were actually at that championship, and so we're all very used to racing with each other. This is also the track where Randall ended up winning the Grand Championship in Indianapolis, and it's just crazy to me that they haven't really used anything from that championship. There were a lot of really good races, there was some really good footage, and they didn't seem to use any of it. They used some of it in a promo for this year's Porsche GT competition, but yeah, we haven't seen any of it. Anyways, back to the race. Holman is proving very difficult to actually get close enough to pass, and I still wasn't feeling incredibly confident, so I wasn't about to go for any kind of dives. Also, I didn't want to do that to Holman. I didn't think I was that much faster than him. I did think that I was probably one of the fastest on the track at the time, especially given the fact that I had the fastest lap, but I wasn't about to pull off some kind of desperation move. I was still getting used to the dirty air, I was still getting used to the brake balance, but Holman also just really quick. Now you can also see on that radar map, or the weather radar, that the rain is completely drying up. However, I was going to give it just a little bit more time because it's going to take at least a lap to dry up all the way. On top of that, by the time it dries up, we'd be able to then see if there was any more rain coming. So I thought it would be best to just stay out, have a little bit compromised pace if it did dry out really quickly, and not risk wasting a whole bunch of time. I don't remember exactly what the pit loss is, but it's something like 45 seconds to an entire minute. So if you take an extra pit, your race is over. At this point, I had actually forgotten that Windfire hadn't taken tires because Payme had spun so much earlier that I figured if someone was going to spin, they would have done it, but Windfire unfortunately lost control right there. That put us back in 4th place. Now, if you look at 1st place, it's our buddy Lisa Salters. I do not want to talk bad about Lisa Salters' pace, but if I'm completely honest, he's usually just not in the top split races, and I don't think I've seen him compete or be in... I've never seen him lead a race with these people. And you got to give it to him. He is holding that position. I think he was on that same strategy that Windfire was on, and he's still way up there. His screen name is Lisa Salters 420. His name isn't Lisa Salters. Like, his screen name used to be Lisa Salters Got Donk or something like that. And it's hilarious, and I laugh every time. Anyways.
It's already dry as shit.
Once again, jumping ahead, if you have not played this game recently, you might not know that the game automatically ghosts drivers into certain corners. You also might not know that as long as a driver is ghosted and you are occupying the same space, if you are in that driver, it will not unghost. It will, however, still provide slip if you're slightly behind them, and knowing that, I took a lot of advantage of it, and you can see on my face what I thought about it.
It's the most toxic thing I've ever done.
This is actually something that I had been testing for my Mythbusters series, and it's something that I had done in previous races just to try to stay safe or to take a position. I'd never done it in a competitive race, but I had to. And I thought Sam would be mad at me, but apparently he was also laughing his ass off in the chat he was in with Cantilever, so I'm glad he wasn't mad. The benefits of it, however, were short-lived, and in fact, it probably would have gone down the exact same way had I just passed him on that straight, but he went for this really beautiful pass, and honestly, you got to give it to him. That was really well done. Now, I mentioned before that we were going to have to pay attention to the weather radar to determine what we were going to do with our tire strategy, and if you look right next to the Panda Bear, that's Hachi, by the way, if you don't know, you can see that the water level is under the first little line, which meant that it is dry enough for the slicks. When deciding to stay out before, I had also noted in my mind that, like I said, it was going to stay wet for a while. It wasn't going to dry out immediately. So the people who did switch to the slicks beforehand weren't able to undercut us because they were almost certainly slower than us on the slicks when it was still a little bit wet. And as predicted, the two people that we saw take the early pit were now behind us. Not by a lot, but they were behind us. And overtaking is always going to be harder than defending when it comes to Gran Turismo's dirty air. Leading into the first chicane on the straight, I was catching up to Sam, and unfortunately for him, he made a mistake. So of course I had to take advantage one more time. You can imagine the jokes that were being said in chat right about now.
The funniest shit I've ever done in my entire life. 2 times in a row. I love you, Sosa. I'm sorry. Now he's got slip, and then hopefully I'll get slip again. I brake late, bro.
I was hoping Sosa was listening, because if we separated for just a brief second, we'd become solid again. And if we had any kind of discrepancy in the speed we entered in the corner, I was afraid that we were going to take each other out. So I was just scared for a brief second. Chat was also really curious what was going on.
The ghosting, they've been doing it at Le Mans for a while, but it's specifically so people can't ram each other off on accident, and especially in like the rainy races.
If you look in my rearview mirror, you can see that Sammy and Holman were ghosted one more time. It's really kind of silly, and I actually don't like it, but of course I'm going to use it if possible. Remember Windfire?
Windfire hasn't pit yet.
We saw the man spin out on lap 2. We saw him spin out just a couple laps ago, and he is back in second place again. I never actually went back to look what tires he was on, but I figured it didn't matter because the man really knows what he's doing. He tests all the time. He probably has some of the deepest knowledge when it comes to exactly what you can do with the tires. And if you think it might be possible to run 11 laps on a compound, Windfire is probably going to run 12 or 13. So at this point, I was pretty sure Windfire was going to win the entire thing. If you look up at the track map, you can see that Randall is within distance. Windfire is just about at the beginning of the final chicane, and Lisa Salters is still way ahead. Jumping forward almost an entire lap, I didn't realize it at the time because I couldn't see, but Randall had a penalty. That brought him from 2.5 seconds in front of me to just about 1.5 seconds in front of me. I talk about this all the time, but the golden distance that we're looking for is about a second behind the person ahead. And you can never count out Randy when it comes to any kind of pace, but I was really feeling my pace now that I got used to the car. I was purple. I had already set the fastest lap, so I was improving my own fastest lap, and I knew that if I can just get close enough to Randy by the next straight, then I was going to be able to keep up with him at the very least, if not give him a battle and potentially pass him. Unfortunately, this is what I did.
The fuck am I doing? I don't know what the fuck that was about. What the fuck? I don't remember braking anywhere differently. Whatever. That was stupid.
To this day, I have no clue why I did that. I was just so intent on catching Randy that I braked a little bit later than I should have and completely messed that up, giving myself another penalty. In what has been the main storyline for pretty much every single race that I've done since this day, I just can't stop getting penalties. I'm not really sure what it is. I don't know if I've got the yips or if I'm just having bad luck or what it is, but I can't stop getting penalties. So luckily Sam had one, and that meant that I get to play with Sam some more. Nothing really happened after we both served this penalty either. I just had to show off that nice little pass to rub it in Sam's face. You'll see why I felt I needed to do that later. So like I mentioned before, when anything goes wrong, it takes a while for me to get over it, and it's really hard for me to just continue focusing. I was unfortunately driving really poorly. Windfire and Sam might have been working together, and then if you hadn't been playing Gran Turismo recently, you might not know there were some really serious server issues, and that was a really big distraction right there. I would have lost that position no matter what. But it definitely made it so it was a lot more difficult to follow Sam, and very difficult to then try to defend against Windfire. And of course, I talk about Windfire a lot. I've been racing him for years. He's fantastic, and I just crumbled under pressure, unfortunately. I wish it was actually due to the lag and all of that, but that was just me succumbing to the pressure, unfortunately. I mentioned that I wanted to show that pass on Sam for a reason, and that reason is honestly just because he beat me and because I'm super petty, but also I love Sam, so it's fun to tease him. I also wish that I could provide a better result, both for myself but also for your viewing entertainment, but unfortunately all I have is drama. So I mentioned before that I wasn't used to the dirty air, and this is the main thing. Even though I lost all that time from penalties earlier, all the penalties from dirty air before, this one was truly the most heartbreaking. So I'll just leave this with no comment.
No. Okay.
And unfortunately, that's just the end of that story. I am pretty proud of myself for, given all the mistakes, being able to pull off 4th place, but I should have done better. I had really good pace. I had a sound strategy, but I couldn't stop myself from making mistakes, and I didn't quite practice the right things. So onwards, hopefully, we'll do better next time.